welcome to Maddox Scale and Customer Success Summit. You are currently attending and watching the Scaling Success, Revolutionizing Customer Engagement in the Digital Age. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, and as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question for today. What would you like to scale in your personal life? So today we have Jeff Kushmerek, CEO and founder of Infinite Renewals. Prior to Infinite Renewals, he held leadership roles at Endeca, Bright Cove, and Virgin Pulse. Thank you so much for being here today, Jeff. So let us know what you'd like to scale in your personal life.
It is 100% sleep. I need to scale my sleep. And you can probably tell, but I've got a Celtics dude back there. But the playoffs have really, I know it's a thing that I'm going to get a lot of heat for here, but staying up late watching our world champion Celtics have really caused my sleep to go down the tube. So that's, if I could scale my sleep, that'd be great. No, that's what I'm shooting for here. So yes, Aisha, you know, I see. There we go. All right.
Love it. Well, as an Atlanta fan, I can't say I agree with the chat or you, but that's okay. I'm not huge on sports.
Okay. You know, just draft better. You know.
Well, awesome. Before we begin the session with Jeff, just a reminder to include any questions that you all have in the chat. Anything that we don't get to, we will have answered after, and we'll post the answers alongside the session recording that will be in our resource hub. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Let me try and see if I can get the old deck fired up here, which I advanced too far forward. Okay. I just laughed because this is such a long name, and I just I stumbled over this every time I do it. So this is what we're talking about today. But in general, when I think about the subject and when I was asked to talk about it, I've rolled out several digital engagement strategies for some of our customers this year. And it can be kind of a big topic. And I saw that we had 30 minutes. I've done this in a 2-hour session. So I said, let's zoom out a little bit and let's just talk about some of the essentials. Because I was just at Pulse and I was talking about these things with some friends and with some people I know. And a lot of people will kind of beautiful minds and get really lost into a lot of the topics. And I feel like there's some essentials to go over. So what I'm talking about today is like, okay, let's think about how we would roll out a digital engagement program and just get into some of the basics. And again, this has been super successful for a bunch of customers of mine over the last year or so. So I am going to go through stuff on that. But in general, I just really like to zoom it out a little bit, right? And why are we doing this? Why are we doing these things, right? And I have a core belief, and I try and validate it. And you can, you know, I'd love to hear yes or no in the chat if you believe this. But you know, if you remove the company went out of business and things like that. When we do a lot of churn analysis, we see that customers churn mostly because they're not seeing the value from the software. And I would also asterisk that and say, nobody's telling them they're getting the value, and they might be getting the value. Or I see often that you're working with admins and the admins are like, great, it's all set up, but they didn't sign the contract and they don't know that they're getting value out of it. And then the CFO comes up halfway through the year and says, hey, are we paying for this random software.co? And they're like, I don't know. I don't hear from them. I haven't heard from them since implementation. I could see, but like whatever. Or somebody comes in with an undercut price. And then in the reason code, they said we lost them because of price. And it's not you were lost because of price. It's you were lost because they weren't getting the value out of it. But we're not here to talk about that. But I always just like to say, well, why don't we talk about some of the ways that we can get the value out to the customers, right? And so, you know, I really have been thinking a lot. Yeah, Darren, me too, right? We chat all day, but let's chat about some of this. I think that's what you're chatting about. I really, the more research I do on the Spotify Wrapped marketing campaign, I just suggest all of you to do it and then think about your customers. Is how, you know, the essential hypothesis is how can we do Spotify Wrapped for our customers, right? And just so some of you don't know, Spotify Wrapped came out a few years ago They were at, and I just have to look down at my notes here because I don't want to mess up the numbers here, but they were at 155 million subscribers and 90 million people engaged with it in that first year. And that's 60%. I'm not a math person per se, but we usually get, I mean, I don't believe the numbers on this. It says usually email opens are at around 15%. I'm shocked on that. Sometimes I see that it's around 3% on cold emails and things like that. But if we thought about, if we're emailing our customers on some general product stuff or things like that, what's the engagement rate on that? But if we think about this, I don't have a CSM for Spotify. There's no Spotify CSM that's reaching out to me. My daughters don't have one or whatever. But I know all of the value. We share this around, it gets viral. And there's other things that go beyond the realm of customer engagement. But there's a real reason why their subscription just they just increased by 20% after this first campaign. And I thought about this like, well, I've had a lot of customers where they sell into large populations of users, and they have a pricing model which says, let's get you up to 10,000 users, then 20,000, then 30,000 users. And then for those situations, I'm like, these would be perfect ways to do it. This is very scalable. By the way, comments are flying here. I'm going to now not look at the comments here, but hopefully we can address some of them. So if we thought about, okay, that works for Spotify. Obviously, that's a B2C model. It's digital. It's super cool. It's music and sexy. How can we take some of these core principles that are known to work, and some of the best consumer models work amazing for B2B models. So I specifically try and only work with, B2B SaaS enterprise customers. So a lot of this is in that realm here. So we thought about that. Okay, how do we make it easier for what we call this long tail of customers? For anybody who survived the e-commerce wars, long tail are these customers that get out of your sort of larger tiers, but sometimes that long tail of customers has actually more ACV or ARR than your big, huge ones, right? We've had every customer I've been at or a company that I've been at, there was always that one big customer, and maybe if your average contract value was 50K, and then suddenly they came in at 200K, and then everybody was doing everything for them. And we noticed that our smaller, longer tail customers weren't getting the feature requests that they wanted because, they're only paying us 30K, they're only paying us 40K. But then when we would look at a feature request and added up all of the customers that wanted that, it dramatically outweighed that one 200K customer, right? So long story there, but how do we do some of these larger digital engagement things? And essentially, how can we make sure that customers that we don't have the possibility to scale out, we can't hire 50 to 75 CSMs to reach all of our customers. How can we put things into place and without it being like a 2-year project and stuff like that? We do it by scaling the teams to meet this volume, but then then how do we do that, right? We do this and this is it. Like if you were to do one thing this year to get this digital thing, it's June 6th. If you were to get this out, and launched this year, because you realize there's a tier of customers, I'm going to show a case study in a second, that are not getting contacted, not seeing the value, to pull it back to that first slide. How do we make sure that we do that, right? And I'm going to go into how you do these things here. So, but up front, you segment your customers by creating the tiers, defining the right workflows, and then putting the tools into place to scale. There's a lot of work that goes into that. But I'm going to exclude a lot of the stuff that when we talk about digital strategies, there's a lot of stuff that comes up. But if we could focus on this, if you said phase 1, let's have a goal of sending out an email to one email, but all the things you need to do to get that email sent is right here on that slide. Okay, I'm going to move along. Right, and Darren, you're right. It's finding the balance between the high volume of customers versus those several whales. And segmentation is a great way to do that, right? So again, quick, I'm not going to read the titles off the slides here, but like when I think about segments and how are we servicing our customers? Is that right? It's not how you're selling to them, because you might be selling to them with like 9 different strategies or 2 different strategies or 1 different. Maybe some people are coming in buying right off the web and not having any sort of gated criteria or whatnot. The one thing, so what I would suggest when you're going through and doing your segmenting, and what always has worked for me, is you pull up some classic customers, actual names when you're doing this with with the team that's going to be doing the segmenting, and you basically say, this is this type of customer, they're paying us this much, and they're in this tier, right? I don't really like more than 3 tiers, because it's kind of like when you want to do red, yellow, green for status updates, and then people are like, well, they're kind of orangey or burnt sienna or goldenrod. It's like, no, it's red, yellow, green, and there's things that we do to move them from red to yellow and yellow to green. And that's kind of how I are with segments. It's like, we know that there's those huge customers we treat differently. Maybe there's this middle ground of, this is what our average customers look like. Thanks, Daniel. And then maybe there's this lower tier that we're kind of focusing on today of, they're not paying as much, or they're in this segment, or they're SMB. They could still make up a large amount. I'm going to show a very good data slide in a second on this. And the one thing I really find works a lot for framing this context is to take one thing that you should all do with your customers and think about what that engagement would be like for each tier. So I say, let's talk about business reviews. Notice I didn't call it quarterly business review. I'm sure that got talked about today, but yes, we should be talking about value in the business that we're bringing back to our customers. But let's say maybe you've got a customer that's paying you $1 million a year versus 50K, right? And I've got plenty of customers that have those types of contracts. And we say, okay, we put them in this sort of upper elite tier, and white glove, they might be getting met monthly, right? Maybe weekly, or maybe they're having weekly calls, but let's zoom out and do like a monthly business review and see where things are. It's, there's that much upscale, there's that much potential. And that's the other thing here when we're talking about customers, is potential. It's not just about ACV. I remember when I was at Virgin, we signed up Coca-Cola for 2 seats. And if we got those 2 seats, we'd be able to get them up to 10,000 and then 50,000 seats after that, right? So we treated them like the top tier, right? But I digress. Let's bring it back to this idea of business reviews as a metaphor. Figure out, on the different tiers that you've now created, how often would you have a business review with them? Okay, I'll get on that in 1 second here. I like to say, okay, monthly for these people, maybe it's quarterly for this segment here, and maybe it's never, or maybe it's like one of these Spotify wrap things. I really liked the concept of Spotify Wrapped, and that's actually, I found, that's why I'm here today, because I came out searching for a solution that would solve this for me, for my customers, because I get super passionate about this subject here. Actually, no, this is a perfect time to answer your question. So you basically said, what are some specific examples of segments other than ARR, product, or industry? Basically the vertical aspects of things here. Vertical elements are some segments as well too. But I like to not think about it in terms of product and industry and things like that. I really go into the service level and how we're going to treat them. And if I did jump fast forward for a minute into like, I was creating playbooks, I don't want 50 playbooks for a renewal. I want 3. Here's my higher tier, medium tier, and lower tier renewal. And then that's where everybody gets tripped up, especially if they're meeting with salespeople, because they're like, no, we have a specific approach for vertical, for this product, and it's really, until you start getting into different product lines and things like that, it's really about how are we servicing this customer. And that's why we're saying like, okay, monthly, quarterly, and then maybe like the yearly Spotify Wrapped as an example here for segments. I've gone down that route, and yeah, I'll be honest, like, many of the time, 95%, you reverse sort ARR, start at the top, work your way down, and find some places to do your lines. And it kind of does work like that. but then you have to then say what customers, as they're coming in from sales, which segment are they in? Are they going to meet? Are they 2 seats, but they need to be treated like 10,000 seats because there's so much upsell potential? Okay, I will move along because again, as I said, I try and get through topics that should only take 30 minutes, and I'm getting into some deeper things here. So this is an actual customer of mine, and I'm just going to make sure I get the context here. So we removed that upper top tier segment. For this particular customer, they were only having CSMs assigned to this upper tier that I've removed from this data set. That data set also has about $25 to $30 million in revenue. Remove that from there and say, okay, what's the problem that we're looking at that we're trying to fix? How many customers are not being contacted right now? And when we get down to it, we found out in these 2 numbers here in product 1 and product 2 that there was essentially $20 million, or actually, see, I can't do math, $21 million in revenue of customers. And you can see the number of customers here, especially across product 2. There's a ton of, add these all up, 48 plus 11 plus 37 of customers, you get roughly 10,000 customers that aren't being contacted. And a lot of them for product 2 were on 3-year contracts. So they would get through a 3 to 5 month implementation, and then you wouldn't hear from them again until till renewal time. So you essentially went 30 months without hearing from anything. And then, as you've probably all heard me say before, it turns into a game of obvious CSM drunk dialing where you're like, hey, your renewal's up, you're ready to renew. Good to hear from you. Here's all the value that we're showing. And it's super transparent. And that's why we try and set things in place before. Exactly. Just reaching out. Hold on. There's a question here from AJ. How do I identify who to really nurture in that medium to lower tier segment and they get to grow and expand? This is part of the tiering, right? It gets back to ICP and then knowing who the people are, that classic case where the HR person bought it, but then you're dealing with the admin people to set it up. Well, you still want to talk to your HR people, right? So also you need to go a little wider in your account and not just focus on a single point of failure as well too. And stay out of the comments here for a minute, but I just want to expose that for a lot of customers, they don't think it's a problem because they're like, oh yeah, these people are just paying us like $1,000 a year, $2,000 a year. And then when you look at the composite of everything, it's a lot more than that. And that's a huge effing problem. Okay, so that's that data set here. I'll move through my notes here. It gets a little faster as we go through here. So now if we talked about why, this is basically why are we tiering, and here's an important case study and why you should absolutely tier because of these lower number of customers that actually add up to a huge ton of amount of revenue. So you don't buy tools next. What you do for your digital thing is what are the absolute processes we need to define? Everybody's will be a little bit different. What is the people model that you use and what people are needed? And then what tools will we use? And tools is last, right? People, processes, and then tools. I see so many people go out and buy a tool and then they go to implement it. And then they're like, oh, well, do you have, if you bought a CSP, walk us through all your playbooks. So we don't have any playbooks. We don't have any process. So like, well, guess what? You're going to have to go define those things, right? So let's talk about some of the initial processes that you should define and how you should go through them. The first thing, again, knowing what your team model is will help define what your process is, right? So there's essentially 2 ways of doing this. I'm not going to read through all this. You're going to get this content. I'm sure there's screenshotting going on, but there's essentially a named resource versus a pooled resource. And the way this usually works in the digital realm is I am a digital CSM. I have 500 to 1,000 accounts here. And anybody who's in that realm, you can certainly pop that into the chat, how many accounts you're managing right now. And then that way, anybody within that 500 account, they will basically contact you if you have a problem. Wow, 4,000. I'm going to get into I would hope that's more pooled model, but named, it's all dependent because sometimes you really don't have to reach out to people. So there's pros and cons of each. With named, you're going to find a person that really knows your business, hopefully. With pooled, you're going to trade that off for response time, essentially. So I know a lot of people, and then the next slide's got the names. So this is all about pooled. This is all about named. I was at a Pulse a few weeks ago, and caught that terrible Pulse plague, by the way. That really knocked me off my feet. So, but I went around. I was talking to some really big companies with massive volumes of people, and they said, as much as it feels bad to treat it like a support problem, the pooled resource really does work, and they've got high levels of customer satisfaction. I sort of felt this way as well too, but always hated it because I'm like, oh, it feels like support. Like you might be using Zendesk and triage rules and things like that. But guess what? Like in this model, people get problems answered a lot faster. And you just have to make sure that you're separating out reactive versus proactive. Everything reactive needs to go over to support. I always say like change password or something like that. Versus a digital CSM should be like, how do I get more value out of my account? How do I do X? How do I get Y? I'm gonna take a quick sip on water. So just give me one quick second here. All right. So this is a decision you have to make. You have to look at what your current team is, what's feasible. And sometimes you really have to kind of take a guess, which is why I always kind of do the kind of pooled modeled first, because you might not be doing anything with your customers right now. So you don't know what the engagement level is going to look like. You can certainly go into your support numbers and say, oh, let's classify which ones of these would have actually gone to a digital CSM. And then you can start making some guesses. But I've definitely seen some people that said, no, we can only handle 500 each, and we need 10 people, and they hire 10 people, and they're sitting around waiting for emails, and they wind up hopefully doing other things like writing doc and doing webinars and things like that. But essentially, if you're looking for a hardcore suggestion, like I would start off with a pooled resource model. Take advantage of some maybe software that you might be using for your support team already, and then assess. And with all of these things, you're just going to try it out and you're going to assess. I'm going to go a little faster, seeing the time here. I'm always trying to go a little bit too in depth on some of these topics, but essentially we can fly through these because you know all of these things here. So processes, I really think you need to focus on like number one here, and then number two, as in how you're going to get this content out to them. When I talked about the beautiful mind aspect, it's because everybody starts talking about all the stuff in number three, and your project just blows up, right? We start talking about community, and then training, and an LMS, and internet messaging, and all this stuff, office hours. By the way, everything on there are best practices of a large, well thought out, rolled out over a few years program. But at the end of the day, again, what are the required touch points that we need to do in the customer journey? What are the playbooks, essentially? What are the processes and the tools that we're going to do to go make sure that they're happening? And then you figure out what type of content we'll need to. I'm going to be honest, like this whole marketing and product marketing and documentation, everything, like, if you might have a product marketing or customer marketing person in your department. If you're a startup, you might have to borrow somebody from marketing. At the end of the day, it's a job to be done, and it's a job that an email needs to be created. That's not an upsell, that are giving the customer ideas around the value that they're getting and maybe some product updates and things like that. And you kind of need to figure out, is that a leveraged resource, or do you need to hire somebody or something like that? Most times you're going to borrow from the marketing team, and then they're going to say, we're too busy and you guys need to go hire somebody eventually. But again, think about it, jobs that need to get done, and who can do that job for us. And that's the way to approach it. Okay, looks like there's great conversation in the chat. I cannot pay attention to it right now. I think when I think about playbooks, and this comes right out of a project of ours, we look at two different categories. You've got your life cycle stuff that you need to do and your risk priority. And essentially, what you need to do is, if you have a lot of customers already, you're probably doing this thing that I call like white glove, then delete. You have all this stuff created for your sort of high touch, white glove, super high touch customers, and you're like, okay, let's start removing aspects from that, right? In your life cycle, like you should always be doing a renewal, you're having some type of business review, but then you get into like, you might not be doing handoffs at a digital level. You might not be doing joint success plans, probably not doing account transitions and things like that, unless maybe it's TBD, especially not in a pooled model. Offboarding, account transitions, kickoffs, things like that. So I would probably maybe only roll out 1 or 2 of those things under life cycle. Risk though, different story, right? Non-responsive customer, they're not logging in, they've notified that they're going to churn, maybe the champion's email is bouncing. Would be good to have some processes built up off that. Build the process, and then start using tools to automate them. And then again, here's my thing on tools. What are your essentials? You need a CSP. I would say if you're doing digital emails and things like that, I think you go beyond the realm of the CRM and then hooking up a CRM into like a marketing platform. It just gets super messy. So I think if you're at that point, you should be using a CSM. I don't care which one, CSP, I don't care which one that you use. Make sure though that they can power emails and you don't have to get into some weird sending stuff over to another email program and things like that. And then some type of support or mail tool for that triaging aspect. Request comes in, make sure it gets to the right person. And then some type of data analytics or something, usage data to understand the customer behavior, right? Quick note on that, a lot of people just go off and they hire, we'll just put our most junior resources on these customers. And if you don't have the data or the RevOps people or something to be able to look at these usage patterns and say, here's some customers that need to go get addressed, like you might need some more advanced people. You might want to flip that and have your more advanced people take on a lot of customers, but they're able to look through digital things and like that. I see a lot of people just make that mistake of hiring super junior resources. And then the next step off after that, and some of the CSPs are getting there, but basing rules off of AI-driven tools and things like that versus you have your basic ones. If usage is down, send an email out or launch this 3-step campaign or things like that. We're now finding out along the way that AI is able to get a little bit ahead of the curve and analyze some stuff, but I'm running out of time, but those are great next steps on these things. But the box on the left is all that you need to get these initiatives off the bat. Here's an example, just again, white glove then delete. And then I think we're almost done with the slides here, but essentially, this is what a real playbook looks like. A lot of people hide their playbooks. I've got no problem showing you this. Again, here's your tiers. Is it required or recommended? Are there artifacts that get sent out with them? If you plan it like this and then hand it over to your people running the CSP, they'll be able to create these rules and implement them. But as I said, take everything that you've got and then just delete the stuff that makes sense for your digital customers. And that's the easiest way to roll it up. You're already doing this stuff. It usually gets into a deletion mode and more emails than usual. So in some quick summary, segment, define your service per segment, choose your team model, get your processes in place, then decide the tools to automate those processes, launch it, assess, then iterate, and then start bringing in those advanced things. So I have a minute. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think you all know how to find me. Thanks. Elizabeth, I try to slow down. I'm half Italian and I am from inner city Boston, so I just kind of let it fly every once in a while. But thank you so much. I will try and go through these questions later if I have access to them and answering them. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. I think you did a great job, honestly, at kind of moderating the conversation and answering questions in live time. But we will definitely go through these and send any through that didn't get answered. But thank you again for your time. This was great, and it was a great conversation in the chat and with you as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.